At my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law leaned in like she was about to offer comfort. Then she whispered, "2 weeks, Ethan. You need to be out of my house." She said it 6 feet above Ryan's casket. My only child, 41 years old, gone. The pastor was still talking about peace and God's plan, and Maddie was already negotiating my life like it was a lease. People around us kept dabbing their eyes, calling her so strong. I watched her stand there in perfect black, perfect makeup, and I realized something ugly. This wasn't strength, it was control. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I didn't even ask why. I just smiled. Maddie blinked like my face wasn't matching the script she'd rehearsed. She wanted tears. A scene. Something she could later tell people. Poor Maddie dealing with Ethan again. But I gave her nothing. On the drive home, she made a phone call from the front seat, voice calm and businesslike. "Monday works. I just need the paperwork ready." Paperwork, not grief, not family. Paperwork. When we got to the house, I climbed the stairs to the room above the garage, the apartment, she'd like to call it, and found my life packed into boxes, neatly sealed, labeled, stacked by the door. "I figured I'd help you get ahead," she said. "It'll make the transition easier." Easier. I looked at those boxes, then at the wedding photo on my dresser, where Ryan was still smiling, still alive. My chest burned, but my voice stayed quiet. "Okay," I said, 2 weeks. That was when Maddie relaxed. She thought my smile meant surrender. So I packed a bag, shut the door behind me, and quietly left. Because she didn't know what Ryan never had the chance to tell her. And the next week, while she was planning renovations and talking to lenders, Maddie was going to get a call from her company's general counsel about a voting trust, an emergency board meeting, and the fact that I controlled 38% of her company. Ryan was my only son. If you'd met him as a kid, you would have thought he'd been raised by a choir director. He held doors. He said yes, sir, without anyone forcing him. When his mother, my Claire, passed, he was 26 and still called me every Sunday, like it was a contract he refused to break, not out of obligation, out of loyalty. Ryan didn't chase attention, he chased work that mattered. He started at a mid-sized logistics firm, did the boring jobs nobody wanted, learned the machinery of it all from the ground up. Then he met Maddie. Madeline Pierce back then, bright, sharp, ambitious in a way that made people lean in when she spoke. She had that polished confidence, like she'd rehearsed life in front of a mirror and perfected every line. At first, I liked her. She looked Ryan in the eye. She asked questions. She laughed at his stupid jokes like they were the funniest thing in the world. They married young, built a life, and for a while, it worked. Then Ryan got his break. A former colleague pulled him into a fast-growing supply chain software startup called Crestline Systems. The kind of company that goes from who to how are they everywhere. In 2 years, Ryan wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he was the one everyone depended on. He could walk into a mess of numbers and personalities and somehow make it all make sense. He rose fast. Director, VP, then the promotion that changed everything, an executive role that came with stock options, travel, and the kind of title that makes strangers suddenly treat you like you're important. That's when Maddie changed. Not overnight, not in a dramatic movie moment, more like a slow shift you can't name until you look back and realize you've been living in a different climate. She started speaking in corporate phrases at family dinners. Leverage, brand, optics. She corrected Ryan in front of people. She talked about their future like it was a presentation, and he was a slide deck. Ryan tried to keep peace. He always did. "Dad," he'd say when Maddie wasn't in the room, "she's just stressed. It'll settle down." But I saw how she looked at him sometimes, like love was a resource she was budgeting. And when Crestline began taking off, Maddie didn't just enjoy the success. She started acting like she owned it. The house was the next shift. I bought this place in 1992 when Scottsdale still felt like it had room to breathe. I wasn't rich then. I was a contractor with calloused hands and a bad knee, building my life with measured payments and stubborn patience. Over the years, I fixed every creak, replaced every board that warped, planted the trees out back with Ryan when he was small enough to ride on my shoulders. This was the only home Ryan ever truly knew. When he and Maddie asked to move in 6 years ago, it was supposed to be temporary. Ryan had just taken a hit. Nothing scandalous, just the kind of corporate reshuffle that leaves you with a shiny title and less stability than you expected. Maddie was pregnant at the time, and they said they wanted to be closer to me while we regroup. They promised they'd find a place once things leveled out. I said yes immediately, because that's what fathers do. Because the house was too quiet after Claire died, and the sound of footsteps, any footsteps, felt like life returning. Noah was born a year later, my grandson. A good kid, gentle like Ryan, but with eyes that noticed everything. He'd sit beside me and listen to old westerns, and when the hero did something honorable, Noah would whisper, "That's what Dad would do." I believed him. For a while, the arrangement worked. Then temporary turned into normal. Maddie took over the living room, one throw pillow at a time. Ryan brought in a home office setup just until the next round closes. My old den became their workspace. My kitchen became her kitchen. And somehow, without a fight, I ended up staying in the finished room above the garage, what Maddie always referred to as Ethan's apartment, as if I was a tenant renting heir. Ryan apologized more than he should have. "I'll fix it, Dad," he'd tell me, once things calmed down. But things never calmed down. Then came the night he died. Maddie called me at 2:18 a.m. Her voice wasn't shaking. Not really. "Ethan," she said, "there's been an accident." That was the word she used, accident. She told me Ryan had been driving back from the office late, that he'd lost control on a turn, that it happened fast, that there was nothing anyone could do. And the next morning, she repeated the story the same way, with the same clean edges, like she'd practiced it. But there were little things that didn't fit. Ryan's car was found miles from the route he would have taken. Maddie said he left the office at midnight, but the security app on the house showed the garage side door opening at 11:07 and closing again at 11:09. Two quick blips like someone came home and left again. When I asked Maddie about it, she didn't hesitate. "Oh, that must have been a glitch. Maybe." But then Noah said something that made my blood run cold. 2 days after the funeral, when the house was full of casseroles and quiet voices, he tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa." The night Dad didn't come home, I heard Mom yelling. I crouched down so our faces were level. "Yelling at who, buddy?" Noah swallowed hard. "On the phone. She said, 'If you do this now, you'll ruin everything.'" "Did you hear Dad?" I asked. He shook his head. "I heard another man. Like Dad's friend from work. The one with the loud laugh." I knew exactly who he meant. And when I looked toward Maddie across the room, smiling at guests, accepting sympathy like she was receiving awards, I felt something new settle in my chest. Not just grief, suspicion. Because if Ryan's death was truly an accident, why did it already feel like someone was managing the story? And why did Maddie move so fast, so ruthlessly to push me out the moment Ryan was in the ground? That was the question I couldn't stop hearing in the silence. And it was the beginning of everything. The day of the funeral, the air felt wrong. Too bright, too warm, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that my son was gone. Maddie rode back from Morrison's chapel in the driver's seat, both hands locked on the wheel, posture perfect. She didn't cry. Not once. She didn't even smear her mascara. She drove like she was late to a meeting. When we pulled into the driveway, she parked with the precision of someone who wanted everything aligned. Then she sat there for a second, staring forward, jaw tight. "I'm going to need you to be flexible these next couple weeks," she said without looking at me. "Flexible," I repeated, like the word was familiar, but didn't belong in this conversation. Maddie finally turned her head. Her eyes were dry, her voice clean. "I need space. I need to reset. And we need to talk about your living situation." There it was again. Living situation, the phrase people use when they want to sound kind while they're doing something cruel. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped out. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. The chimes on the porch, the faded paint on the railing Ryan and I never got around to fixing, the mesquite tree out front that used to drop pods like clockwork, but the inside felt like a different place. It smelled like lilies from the funeral arrangements, mixed with the sharp scent of disinfectant. Maddie had already wiped everything down, like grief was a mess she could sanitize. She walked straight to the kitchen island and set her purse down like she was claiming territory. "I made a list," she said, and slid a piece of paper across the counter. "A list." I stared at it. Bullet points, dates, a neat little timeline with checkboxes. Here, call attorney, update accounts, cancel subscriptions, remove Ryan's name from utilities, schedule appraisal, Ethan move out, 14 days. My eyes snagged on that last line. Not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because seeing it printed like that made it real in a way her whisper at the graveside hadn't. "You wrote this down," I said. Maddie's expression didn't change. "I have to be organized, Ethan. If I don't control the details, I spiral." "Control, always control." "This free ride is over," she added, the words dropping like coins into a jar. "I've been carrying this household for years. Ryan insisted on keeping everything the way it was. But Ryan's gone." She said it like she was talking about a canceled warranty. I felt my throat tighten. I reached for the edge of the counter with one hand, steadying myself. "What exactly are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying you need to leave," Maddie replied, still businesslike. 2 weeks is generous. I looked at some senior housing options. There are communities that take fixed income. You can apply for assistance if you need to. Assistance. That word landed hard, like she'd already sorted me into a category: old, broke, inconvenient. Before I could answer, the front door opened and a man's voice filled the entryway. "Maddie? Hey!" Caleb Hart stepped inside, tall and polished in a dark suit that looked too expensive for a weekday afternoon. Crestline's CFO. I'd met him twice, once at a company holiday party and once in my own living room when he stopped by to congratulate Ryan. Back then, he'd shaken Ryan's hand too hard and smiled like he was winning something. Now he walked in with the sympathy card in one hand and his phone in the other, like he'd scheduled condolence time between calls. His eyes found me, and for a split second something flickered there. Recognition, calculation, then a quick mask of concern. "Mr. Walker," he said warmly, I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I replied. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Maddie, are you okay?" Maddie's smile snapped into place so fast it looked rehearsed. "I'm managing." Caleb glanced at the paper on the counter. His eyes scanned the checklist and landed, just briefly, on the line that said, "Ethan move out, 14 days." His jaw tightened, barely noticeable. Then he looked back at Maddie and forced his expression smooth again. "I brought this," he said, holding up the card, "and some food gift cards, just in case." Maddie took them quickly, like she didn't want me seeing the gesture. "That's thoughtful," she said, then added too fast. "Ethan was just about to rest. He's exhausted." Caleb's eyes stayed on me a half-second too long. Not pity, not kindness. More like he was checking whether I was a problem. Then, as if he'd remembered something, he leaned closer to Maddie and murmured, "We should talk later, about the board packet." Maddie's shoulders stiffened. "Not here," she whispered back. I heard it anyway. Board packet. Condolences weren't the only reason Caleb showed up. Noah came down the hallway then, still in his little black dress shirt, collar crooked, eyes red but dry, the way kids' eyes get when they've cried too much to keep crying. He walked straight to me and slid his hand into mine. His fingers trembled. "Grandpa," he whispered, barely moving his lips. "Mom said you're broke." I felt my chest tighten so suddenly it almost stole my breath. Broke. Not grieving. Not hurting. Not a grandfather who just buried his son. Broke. I looked down at Noah. "Who told you that?" I asked softly. Noah's eyes flicked toward Maddie. She said you don't have any money and you've been living here because Dad felt sorry for you." I kept my face still. I kept my voice calm. "Is that what you think?" I asked him. Noah shook his head quickly. "No, I think you're good. Dad said you're the strongest person he knows." My throat burned. I squeezed Noah's hand and nodded. "Go wash your face, buddy." He hesitated, then obeyed. When he was gone, Maddie exhaled like she was annoyed by the interruption. "I've already packed your things," she said, as if she'd been waiting to say it. "They're upstairs by the garage door. You can take whatever you need tonight and come back for the rest later." "You packed my things," I repeated, the words flat. "I had time this morning," she said. "It's better this way, cleaner, less emotional." "Less emotional." I stared at her, at Caleb standing behind her with his sympathy card in his careful eyes, at the checklist on my counter like I was a task to complete. My entire body wanted to explode. Years of memories, my son's laughter in these walls, my wife's voice in the kitchen, the fact that I had paid for every inch of this place, and now I was being treated like a squatter. But I didn't give Maddie the satisfaction. I looked at the list again, at the box she'd drawn around 14 days. Then I lifted my gaze to her face. "Okay," I said quietly, 2 weeks. Maddie blinked, thrown off. Caleb's eyebrows rose slightly. "Okay?" Maddie repeated, almost disappointed. She'd expected a fight, a scene, something she could point to and say, "See? He's unstable. He's difficult." But all she got was my calm. "Okay, I said again, and this time I even let a small smile touch the corner of my mouth. Because they still didn't understand what they were doing. They thought my silence meant I had nowhere to go. They thought my old truck and simple clothes meant I had nothing. They thought kindness was weakness. And in that moment, as my daughter-in-law stood in my kitchen with a checklist for my life and my son's CFO watched me like I was a loose end, I made a decision. I would leave, quietly, on their timeline, with my dignity intact, and I would let them keep believing their assumptions, right up until the moment those assumptions cost them everything. The next morning, I did exactly what Maddie expected. I didn't make a speech. I didn't call relatives. I didn't stand in the doorway and demand respect. I packed a small duffel bag, 2 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my shaving kit, the framed photo of Ryan at 9 years old missing his front tooth, grinning like the world had never heard him, and the old pocket knife my father gave me, more sentimental than useful now. Maddie watched from the kitchen with a mug of coffee, scrolling her phone like I was background noise. "You don't have to be dramatic," she said without looking up. "I'm not," I replied. I walked past her, quiet, steady, no negotiation, no pleading. Noah came out of the hallway in socks, rubbing his eyes. When he saw my bag, he froze. "Grandpa, where are you going?" I crouched to his level and kept my voice calm. "Just for a little while, buddy. Your mom needs space." His face tightened. "But you live here." "I'll be okay," I said, and I meant it. "You be good for me." He hugged me hard, the way kids hug when they don't have words for fear. Maddie's eyes flicked up for a second, annoyed, not concerned, then went back to her screen. I stood, slipped my keys into my pocket, and walked out. No fight, no scene, just the click of the front door closing behind me. Out by the curb, my truck sat exactly where it always had. Faded paint, a dent on the tailgate, engine that sounded rough but never quit. I tossed the duffel into the passenger seat and drove away slowly. Not because I didn't know where I was going, but because every foot of that driveway held a memory. Ryan learning to ride a bike. Claire standing on the porch, waving. Noah chasing bubbles across the lawn. And now, me leaving with a bag like a man being evicted from a life he paid for. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't want pity. I didn't want anyone calling Maddie and making this louder than it needed to be. I went to a cheap motel off the freeway, the kind with flickering neon and curtains that never fully closed. The room smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. The air conditioner rattled like it was fighting for its life. Perfect. If Maddie wanted to tell herself I was broke and desperate, I'd give her a setting that matched her story. I put the bag on the bed, sat in the stiff chair by the window, and made the one call I'd been holding back since the cemetery. Martin Cho answered on the second ring. "Ethan," he said quietly. "I heard about Ryan. I'm sorry." "Thank you," I replied. My voice stayed even. I need advice. Martin had been Claire's attorney for decades. Estate planning, trusts, the kind of work you do when you've built something you want protected from the world, and sometimes from family. I told him everything. The whisper at the graveside, the boxes, the checklist, the 2-week ultimatum. Martin didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long pause, and then he sighed. "She actually packed your things." "Yes." "And she thinks she can force you out." "Yes." "Ethan," he said carefully, "don't confront her yet." I stared at the dirty window, watching cars blur past on the freeway. "Why not?" "Because the moment you show your hand, she'll start rewriting the story. She'll lawyer up. She'll move assets. She'll weaponize Noah. You need to be strategic." "I'm tired of being strategic," I said, and it came out sharper than I intended. "I know," Martin replied, "but this isn't just about dignity. This is about control, and you have it, if you don't waste it." He cleared his throat. "Claire set this up for a reason. The Walker family trust, the voting structure, the proxies. You're the trustee, Ethan. You're not a guest in that house. You're the owner. And you're not powerless in Crestline either." I didn't ask him to repeat it. I already knew what my wife had done. Claire never liked Maddie's smile. She used to say it looked like a handshake you shouldn't accept. Martin continued, "The trust holds a 38% stake. Not just common shares, voting control, contingent on certain triggers. Claire wrote it tight." A slow, cold calm settled over me. "So if Maddie thinks she's going to sell the house, she can," Martin said. "Not without the title being clear. And it isn't. And if she tries something sloppy, she exposes herself." I leaned back in the chair. "So what do I do?" "Let her believe you're nothing," Martin said. "Let her get comfortable. Let her move. Then you respond with documents, not emotion." I thought about Maddie's face when I said, okay, the way her shoulders relaxed, like she'd already won. Fine, I said, I'll wait. Good, Martin replied. And Ethan, keep everything in writing, dates, times. If she's rushing, it's because she's afraid of something. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time listening to the air conditioner rattle. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Noah. It wasn't written by him. Not really. Too many perfect words. But I could hear his small voice behind it anyway. Grandpa, Mom is on the phone a lot. She says refinance and listing. She said we need the house title cleared. My jaw tightened. Title cleared. That wasn't grief talking. That was urgency. I called Noah immediately. He answered in a whisper. Grandpa, he said. Are you okay? I asked. I'm in my room, he whispered. Mom's downstairs. Mr. Caleb is here. Caleb. Even in a motel room that smelled like bleach and old smoke, I felt the temperature drop. What are they saying? I asked. Noah hesitated like he was scared of getting caught. Then he lowered his voice even more. I heard Mom say, we need the house title cleared before anyone starts asking questions. And Mr. Caleb said, then stop stalling. Get it done. My grip tightened on the phone. Maddie wasn't just trying to push me out. She was trying to move fast, too fast, for someone who had nothing to hide. I kept my voice calm for Noah. Listen to me, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. Go downstairs like normal. Don't tell them we talked, okay? Okay, he whispered. When the call ended, I stared at the motel wall. Maddie thought my silence meant surrender. Caleb thought I was a loose end. And somewhere between refinance and clear the title, they were rushing toward something they didn't want anyone to see. Good. Let them rush. Let them believe the old man in the cheap motel had no cards left. Because that's when people make the worst mistakes. And I was done correcting assumptions for free. 2 nights after I left, Noah showed up at my motel like a guilty shadow. He wore a hoodie that swallowed his frame, and he kept looking over his shoulder like the parking lot itself might report him. When he reached my door, he didn't knock loud, just 2 soft taps, then he slipped inside and shut it fast. Grandpa, he whispered, breathing hard, Mom said I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore. My stomach tightened. Did she say why? Noah shook his head. She's been looking for stuff. Papers. Dad's papers. She keeps opening drawers and boxes. And she got mad because a key was missing. A key? I asked. Noah dug into his backpack and pulled out an old paperback western, one Ryan used to tease me about because I'd watched the movie version 100 times. The cover was bent, pages yellowed. Noah flipped it open and shook it once. A small brass key fell into my palm, and with it, a folded scrap of paper. Ryan's handwriting. For Dad, if anything happens. My throat went tight. I unfolded the note carefully, like it might tear if I breathed too hard. On the inside, he'd written one more line. Garage safe, breaker closet, don't wait. Noah's eyes shined. I found it behind Dad's old movie box. Mom was downstairs on the phone. I heard her say, if we can't refinance, we'll have to list fast. Then she said, find the lockbox. Ryan had everything in a lockbox. That name, lockbox, hit like a bell. Ryan had installed a small wall safe years ago, hidden behind the old breaker panel in the garage storage closet. Maddie had never cared about it. Until now. I crouched and held Noah's shoulders. You did good, I told him. You hear me? You did the right thing. He swallowed. Is Mom bad? Noah didn't ask it like a kid asking for gossip. He asked it like a kid asking whether the ground under his feet was still safe. I kept my voice steady. Your mom is scared, and when people get scared, they do ugly things. But you're not alone. Not ever. Noah nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Then I gave him the only instruction that mattered. Go back like normal. Don't let her know you brought this. If she asks, you don't know anything, okay? He hesitated, then nodded again and slipped out into the night. The second he was gone, I made one call. Martin Cho answered on the first ring. Ethan. She's searching, I said. She's looking for a lockbox. Noah found Ryan's key. Martin's tone sharpened. Where are you? Motel off the 101. Stay put, he said. I'm coming to you. We do this clean. 40 minutes later, Martin sat at my small motel table with his laptop and a portable scanner. He didn't waste time on comforting words. He knew grief. He also knew timing. Tell me exactly what the note says, he instructed. I slid it over. Martin read, then nodded once. Okay, if this is the garage safe, we have 2 problems, he said. 1, Maddie might find it first. 2, if she finds it, she'll control the story before we can prove anything. So what do we do? I asked. Martin looked me in the eye. We retrieve what's inside legally and quietly, and we copy everything tonight. He'd already anticipated the next step. Through the proper channels, he'd arranged access to Ryan's personal effects that were legally mine to review as next of kin and trustee. Documents Maddie assumed she controlled because she controlled the house. Within the hour, we were in Martin's office downtown, after hours, lights dim, building quiet. No witnesses, no drama, just truth and paper. Martin placed a small fireproof box on the conference table, Ryan's lockbox, transferred into legal custody earlier that day. "I didn't tell you I had this," Martin said, "because if you'd known, you might have confronted her, and you can't unring that bell." I nodded. He was right. I slid Noah's brass key into the lock. It turned like it had been waiting for my hand. Inside were 4 labeled envelopes and a black USB drive taped to the bottom. Martin opened the first envelope. Deed. He slid the document toward me. "The deed to my house, purchased in 1992. Ethan Walker, sole owner. My name in ink. My life on paper." The second envelope read, "Walker Family Trust." Martin scanned it quickly. "Your wife built a fortress," he murmured. "You're the trustee. The house is trust protected, and the corporate stake is held here too." The third envelope was thicker. Crestline, voting. Stock certificates. Voting agreement. Proxy language. A summary sheet with a number circled in Ryan's hand. 38%. Martin tapped the page. "This isn't just shares," he said. "It's voting control." And Claire wrote a trigger clause. If the trustee is coerced or removed from trust property, control activates. Maddie's ultimatum may have done exactly that. I sat back slowly, the calm in my chest turning colder. Then Martin picked up the last envelope. "If I'm gone, Dad first." My fingers hovered over it. "Open it," Martin said gently. Inside was a sealed letter and the USB. We played the video first. Ryan appeared on screen, exhausted, eyes haunted. "Dad," he said, voice low, "if you're seeing this, they didn't stop." He swallowed hard. "Maddie and Caleb are moving money, fake vendors, side deals, and when I asked questions, Caleb told me to back off. I think they're planning to set me up. Make me the fall guy. If something happens to me, don't accept accident without proof." The video ended with Ryan's gaze locked on the camera. "Protect Noah," he whispered, "and don't let her push you out." The room went silent. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Noah. "Grandpa, Mom called a locksmith. She's in the garage right now." Martin looked at me. "We have what we need," he said. "Now we prepare your next move." I stared at my son's face, frozen in that last frame. Tired, frightened, telling me he'd been set up. Maddie thought she was hunting paperwork to refinance a house. But she was really hunting the truth. And the truth was already in my hands. 1 week after the funeral, 7 days after Maddie whispered my eviction over my son's grave, she got the call. It was 8:14 a.m. on a Monday. I know the exact time because Martin Cho had me sitting in his office with a fresh folder of copies, waiting for the moment the trap finally snapped shut. Maddie answered on speaker because she always wanted the upper hand, even on the phone. "Hi, this is Madeline Walker." The voice on the other end was calm, measured, professional in the way only in-house counsel can be when they're about to ruin your morning. "Ms. Walker, this is Sonia Alvarez, General Counsel for Crestline Systems." Maddie's posture stiffened. "Yes, hi Sonia. Is something wrong?" "We received a shareholder instruction this morning," Sonia said. Maddie blinked. Shareholder instruction?" "Yes," Sonia replied, like she'd already said it 3 times to people who didn't want to hear it. "A voting proxy has been activated. An emergency board meeting has been called. You are required to attend." Maddie's voice sharpened. "Who authorized that?" Sonia paused just long enough to let the name land like a hammer. "The trustee," she said. "Ethan Walker." For a half second, the room went silent except for Maddie's breathing. Then she laughed. One short, brittle sound. "That's not possible." "It is," Sonia replied, "and it's effective immediately." Maddie's face flushed red, then drained pale. I watched it happen through the glass wall of Martin's office, as if I were watching a storm roll across a desert. Fast, violent, unstoppable. "That man is—" Maddie started. Sonia cut her off, still calm. "Ms. Walker, I'm going to advise you to speak carefully. The board will be present. Counsel will be present. And any statements you make may be documented." Maddie swallowed. "When is the meeting?" "In 1 hour," Sonia said. "Conference room 14B, corporate headquarters." The call ended. Maddie didn't speak for several seconds. Her eyes flicked around the room like she was searching for hidden cameras. Then she turned to Caleb Hart, who'd been standing beside her kitchen island in her mind this entire week, whispering, pushing, urging speed. "Caleb," she hissed, voice cracking, "what is this?" "I don't know," he lied quickly. Too quickly. "Maybe it's some old trust paperwork. Maybe it's not enforceable." Maddie's jaw clenched. "You told me the house was ours." "It was Ryan's," Caleb said, shifting. "At least, he acted like it was." "Acted," Maddie snapped. "We refinanced our lives around that assumption." Assumptions. That word again. Exactly what had brought her to this point. An hour later, Maddie walked into Crestline headquarters in a black blazer-like armor. Caleb followed 2 steps behind, trying to look supportive, while his eyes darted like a man scanning exits. Conference room 14B was glass and chrome and polished wood, built to intimidate. At the far end of the table sat Graham Pike, the board chair, expression blank as winter. Sonia Alvarez stood to his right with a legal pad. 2 other directors sat beside Graham, quiet and watchful. Graham didn't rise when Maddie entered. "Ms. Walker," he said, voice flat, "sit." Maddie took the seat nearest the door. Caleb hovered, then sat beside her like a bodyguard who suddenly realized he might be guarding the wrong person. Graham folded his hands. "We've been notified of an activated voting proxy and a shareholder directive tied to the Walker Family Trust. Before we proceed, we need clarification about your conduct and any conflicts of interest." Maddie forced a smile. "I don't understand. Ryan is gone. I'm the surviving spouse. I'm handling his affairs." Sonia's pen scratched once across paper. "You are handling something," she said, "but not lawfully, if the allegations are accurate." Maddie's smile faltered. "Allegations?" Graham slid a thin packet across the table. "We received notice you initiated a refinance inquiry and began discussions with a broker regarding liquidation of a property connected to trust assets, while simultaneously serving as an executive with fiduciary exposure. That is a potential self-dealing issue." Maddie's hands tightened. "That house is my home." Graham's eyes didn't change. "We are not debating feelings. We are debating ownership and control." Caleb leaned forward. "This is being blown out of proportion. Maddie is grieving. She's trying to stabilize her child's life." Sonia turned her gaze on him. "Mr. Hart, you are not counsel. Please limit your commentary." Caleb sat back, lips pressed thin. That was when the door opened again. And I walked in. No suit, no entourage, just my old leather belt, a plain button-down, and the kind of calm you earn when you've buried the people you love and still have to keep breathing. Maddie's eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. I nodded once to Graham. "Mr. Pike, Ms. Alvarez." Graham gestured to an empty seat across from Maddie. "Mr. Walker, please." I sat down slowly, placed a folder on the table, and looked directly at Maddie. "You gave me 2 weeks," I said quietly. "That was generous, you said." Maddie's voice came out thin. "Ethan, this isn't—" "It is," I cut in, still calm, "and we're going to finish it." I slid the first document across the table. "The deed," I said. "My home." Maddie's eyes flicked down. Her face tightened. I slid the second page over. "No mortgage," I continued. "I paid it off decades ago. What you thought was ownership was convenience." Maddie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I slid the trust summary forward. "You assumed I was broke," I said, "because I drive an old truck and I don't talk about money. The Walker Family Trust owns the house, along with the majority of our family assets. I am the trustee." Sonia's gaze stayed on Maddie like a camera that never blinks. Then I slid the Crestline documents across. "And this," I said, tapping the page where Ryan had circled the number, "is why you got that call. 38% voting control. You don't just work here, Maddie. You answer to the trust." Maddie's lips parted. Caleb's face went gray. I didn't stop. I took out the final item, Ryan's sealed letter, the one that made my hands shake the first time I held it. "And you lied," I said, voice lower now, heavier, "about what happened the night my son died." Maddie's breath hitched. "How dare you?" "I have a video," I said, "from Ryan, and copies are already secured." The room turned icy. Graham leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, are you alleging criminal misconduct?" I looked at Maddie, then at Caleb. "I'm saying my son believed he was being set up," I said. "And I'm saying you two have been moving like people with something to hide." Maddie's eyes glistened, not with grief, but with panic. "Ethan, please. Noah." "That's the only reason we're not done right now," I said. "Noah." I opened my folder and set down a single-page agreement. "Here's what happens next," I said. You have 30 days to move out of my house. 30. More than you gave me. Maddie stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. You will sign an arrangement that guarantees my access to Noah, I continued, and you will consent to a full independent review of Crestline-related finances connected to your household, emails, vendor contracts, reimbursements, transparency. Caleb started to speak again, but Sonia's glance shut him down. And if that review finds evidence of fraud, I finished, Martin Cho will forward everything to the appropriate authorities. SEC, law enforcement, whoever needs it. Maddie's voice cracked. You're doing this to punish me. I held her gaze. No, I'm doing this to protect my grandson and to honor my son. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Maddie's shoulders sagged, like the fight drained out of her all at once. The mask slipped, not into remorse, into fear. Graham Pike nodded once, cool and final. Ms. Walker, you will comply with counsel's instructions. This board will not be blindsided again. I stood, gathering my folder. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel wasn't clean. It wasn't triumphant. It was sharp, then hollow, because every piece of power on that table, every deed, every share, every proxy came with the same price tag. Ryan, and no amount of control would ever bring my son back. 3 months later, the house was quiet again, but not the hollow kind of quiet that follows a funeral, the kind that feels earned. Maddie didn't get dragged out in handcuffs. Life isn't always that clean. But Crestline's board moved fast once the independent review started. Within 2 weeks, Maddie was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A month after that, she resigned. Her statement was short, carefully worded, and full of the same corporate polish she'd worn like armor. Caleb didn't get to write his own ending. The auditors flagged irregular vendor payments, missing approval trails, and emails that shouldn't have existed. Crestline terminated him the same day the internal report hit the board. Last I heard, there was an active investigation. I stopped chasing updates. Revenge is loud. I didn't need noise. I needed peace. And I needed the truth documented where it belonged. Noah and I found a rhythm. A real one. We set a schedule through the court. Weekends with me. One evening midweek. Holidays split. Noah started therapy with a counselor who didn't treat him like a problem to fix, but a kid trying to survive adult decisions. Some days he came home quiet. Some days he talked until bedtime. Either way, I listened. I turned Ryan's old room into a small workshop library. His photos on one wall, Claire's on the other, tools on the bench, books on the shelves. On Sundays, Noah and I build something simple. Birdhouses, model kits, anything that keeps his hands busy and his mind calm. People still ask why I didn't scream, why I didn't fight sooner. Because quiet doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes it means patient. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who's been treated like they're disposable, and drop a comment. Have you ever seen someone mistake kindness for weakness?